Fall asleep to Enola Holmes, The Secret in the Prayer Book. Chapter 1, The Vanishing of Miss Cranford. The sleepy village of Bickley Hollow, tucked away in the rolling hills of Surrey, had a charm that many visitors found irresistible. The cobbled streets, the moss-covered stone cottages, and the gardens bursting with ivy seemed like something out of a pastoral painting. It was the kind of place where time itself seemed to slow, and the hustle of London felt worlds away. For Enola Holmes, however, Bickley Hollow was anything but a serene escape. She had never been one to revel in quietude. Her mind was always busy, always restless. It was the reason why, after a rather tiresome week spent visiting her older brother Sherlock and his growing list of cases in London, she had insisted on a change of scenery. Sherlock had agreed, although somewhat reluctantly, saying she needed a restful retreat, much to her amusement. Yet even in the midst of such pastoral peace, Enola's sharp eyes never failed to notice the subtle threads of intrigue woven into the village's fabric. There were stories beneath every smile, secrets hidden behind every garden gate, and mysteries that only she could uncover. And so, on the fourth morning of her stay at the humble guest house owned by a kindly widow, Enola found herself on the cusp of yet another mystery. It began as a whisper, one that had fluttered to her ears while she was seated at a small table in the village's only tea shop. Enola had spent the morning in conversation with the proprietor, Mrs. Ellsworth, who was ever so eager to share the most recent gossip. Of course, Enola had been careful to stay attentive, letting Mrs. Ellsworth rattle on while keeping her sharp mind focused on what she truly needed to hear. It was then that Miss Eleanor Cranford, a local schoolteacher, was mentioned, one of the village's more enigmatic figures. Miss Cranford, a woman of striking beauty and an air of quiet melancholy, had been the subject of Mrs. Ellsworth's conversation, but there was something unsettling about her sudden disappearance 2 nights ago. "She's gone, Miss Holmes," Mrs. Ellsworth said, shaking her head with a puzzled expression. "One minute, she was tending to her garden as usual, and the next, poof! Vanished, just like that. I don't know who'd want to harm the poor dear. She's got no enemies, not that I know of." Enola sat up straighter, her interest piqued. "You say she disappeared in the middle of the night?" "That's right," Mrs. Ellsworth replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Her room was found empty, and her things, all untouched. A clean bed, not a wrinkle. Even her prayer book was left open on her nightstand, as though she had just stepped away for a moment." A prayer book. Enola's mind raced. There was something strangely deliberate about the absence of Miss Cranford, especially in a village as small and seemingly tranquil as Bickley Hollow. People didn't vanish without cause, not unless there was something they didn't want to be found. It was enough to pull Enola from the warmth of her tea. She placed her cup down with a soft clink. "And the authorities?" she asked, her tone casual, though her curiosity was anything but. Mrs. Ellsworth's eyes darted nervously to the window, as though fearful someone might overhear. "Well, the constable has gone to speak to her family, her father, I believe. They say she's just gone off on one of her walks, as she sometimes does when she's feeling poorly. But, Miss Holmes, I've lived here long enough to know that people don't just wander off like that, especially not in the middle of the night. There's something more to it." Enola felt a sudden surge of energy. She had barely set foot in this village, and already, she sensed the stirrings of something bigger, something she could not resist. There was a mystery waiting to be uncovered here, and she was determined to find out the truth behind Miss Cranford's disappearance. That afternoon, Enola made her way to Miss Cranford's cottage, which sat at the edge of the village, nestled beside a quiet stream. The house was quaint, with a thatched roof and ivy creeping up the stone walls. Enola approached with caution, knowing that the quietest places often held the loudest secrets. The door was slightly ajar, the hinges creaking as she pushed it open. Inside, the house was dark, but not abandoned. It had an air of untouched melancholy, the furniture neatly arranged, a cup of tea half finished on the small kitchen table. A fire still smoldered in the hearth, casting a faint light over the room. Enola's eyes scanned the space, her mind quickly processing every detail. The smell of fresh herbs still lingered in the air, and on the kitchen counter, a small notebook sat open, as though Miss Cranford had been in the middle of something. Enola approached it, her fingers brushing over the pages. The writing was neat, careful, nothing unusual about it at first glance. But then she spotted something. The last line, written in a hurried scrawl, caught her eye. "I must meet him tonight. The prayer book is the key." Enola's pulse quickened. A meeting. A prayer book. The mention of a key. It was as though Miss Cranford had known something was coming, something dark, something that required secrecy. Enola snapped the notebook closed and tucked it into her coat. Whatever this meeting was, whatever the prayer book represented, Miss Cranford had left a trail of clues, and it was Enola's job to follow them. The village was beginning to stir with whispers by the time Enola returned to Mrs. Ellsworth's tea shop. She sat by the window, her mind still racing with the revelations of the day. It was growing darker, and she had little time. The mention of the prayer book and the cryptic note in Miss Cranford's house pointed to a deeper mystery. And in this small village, the more Enola dug, the more the layers of quiet life began to peel away. She had questions, and she knew she needed answers. Who was Miss Cranford meeting? Why had she left a seemingly innocuous item, a prayer book, behind in the middle of her disappearance? And why had she written such a mysterious note? Enola's fingers drummed against the table as she looked out over the cobbled streets. There were no immediate answers, but she could feel the pulse of the village beneath the surface. Gossip was already brewing, and soon the entire village would be caught up in the mystery. But she, Enola Holmes, was the only one who had the mind to untangle the web. Her thoughts were interrupted when the door swung open. A man entered, his eyes scanning the room with a furtive glance. He looked familiar, though Enola couldn't place him immediately. He was tall, with dark hair, wearing a long coat that was far too fine for the village. There was a nervousness about him, and Enola noticed the way he quickly averted his gaze when he saw her. Mrs. Ellsworth greeted him with a nervous smile. "Ah, Mr. Green. Good to see you again. What brings you to Bickley Hollow today?" Mr. Green smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just passing through," he muttered, avoiding direct eye contact. "Have you seen Miss Cranford around?" She's overdue for our appointment." Enola's interest piqued, and she straightened in her seat, unable to hide her curiosity. This was the first direct mention of a meeting, a rendezvous. But the man's discomfort was palpable. He was lying, or at least trying to hide something. Enola's sharp eyes never left him. "I believe Miss Cranford has gone missing," she said softly, her voice dripping with casual concern. "Have you heard?" The man's eyes widened, his expression briefly faltering before he composed himself. "I hadn't heard," he said, though it was clear from his reaction that this news was far from a surprise. Enola knew then, this was no ordinary villager. Mr. Green knew far more than he was letting on. And as she watched him slip out of the tea shop, her heart raced with the knowledge that the first of many secrets was beginning to unravel. Chapter 2: The Hidden Truth. The evening was closing in as Enola left Mrs. Ellsworth's tea shop, her mind still racing with questions. The words "overdue for our appointment" echoed in her mind. Mr. Green's reaction had been too quick, too guarded. There was something he wasn't saying, something about Miss Cranford's disappearance that had caused him far more concern than he was willing to admit. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Enola wrapped her scarf tightly around her neck and headed toward Miss Cranford's cottage again, her footsteps swift and purposeful. The village was quiet now, its peaceful exterior a stark contrast to the storm of mystery swirling just beneath the surface. Enola felt the weight of the investigation pressing on her chest, but she was determined. Something told her that Miss Cranford's disappearance was not a mere coincidence. There was a larger web at work here, one that reached into the very heart of Bickley Hollow. Upon arriving at the cottage, Enola stepped inside once more, her eyes scanning the room for anything she might have missed earlier. The note she had found in the notebook still lingered in her thoughts, the cryptic message about the prayer book and a secret meeting gnawing at her. Miss Cranford had left a trail of breadcrumbs, and Enola was intent on following it to the end. Her eyes fell on the small table beside the fireplace. The prayer book was still there, exactly where it had been before, its leather cover worn from use. She picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hands. The book seemed innocent enough, small, unassuming, its pages slightly yellowed with age. But something about it felt different now. Enola opened it slowly, her fingers tracing the pages as she flipped through them. Most of the text was devotional, religious passages written in a delicate hand. But then, near the back of the book, she found something that made her pulse quicken, a small piece of paper, folded and tucked between the pages. Unfolding it, she saw a brief, hurriedly written note. "The meeting will take place tonight at midnight. You know where. Do not tell anyone. The prayer book is the key. Do not fail." Enola's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the confirmation that Miss Cranford had been involved in something far more mysterious than anyone had suspected. The note referred to a meeting, one that had clearly been planned in secrecy. But the mention of the key was the most telling part. What was it that the prayer book held? What was Miss Cranford involved in that made her vanish? Enola tucked the note into her coat pocket and stood for a moment, her mind whirling. She couldn't let anyone else know what she had discovered, not yet. The authorities would certainly be no help in this situation. They had already written off Miss Cranford's disappearance as nothing more than a woman wandering off. But Enola knew better. She needed to find out who Miss Cranford was meeting, and she needed to do it before the mystery slipped further into darkness. And there was only one person in Bickley Hollow who might know more than he let on, Mr. Green. The next day, Enola made her way to the outskirts of the village, to the small shop that Mr. Green owned. It was an inconspicuous place. His shop sold everything from household goods to imported fabrics. Nothing that would draw attention. But Enola was sure now, Mr. Green was hiding something. She arrived just as the first light of the morning stretched across the sky, the village still quiet, save for the clinking of dishes from inside the shop. She walked inside, greeted by the faint scent of old wood and linen. Mr. Green was behind the counter, his eyes flicking up as she entered.
Ah,
Miss Holmes. What can I do for you today? He asked, his voice polite but distant. He didn't smile, but his gaze was sharp, measuring. I was hoping you might assist me with a few things, Enola said, stepping closer to the counter. I've been looking into the disappearance of Miss Cranford. The moment she said the name, Mr. Green's eyes narrowed. He didn't speak immediately, but his posture stiffened, and for a brief second, Enola saw a flash of unease. She could tell he was struggling to maintain his composure. Miss Cranford, he echoed, his voice tinged with feigned surprise. I'm afraid I don't know much about it. Just a bit of gossip, no doubt. Enola smiled, though there was no warmth in it. I'm not so sure about that, Mr. Green. You see, Miss Cranford was involved in something I believe you know more about than you're letting on. A meeting that was to take place last night, at midnight, according to a note I found in her prayer book. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Mr. Green's face paled, but he quickly masked it with a forced chuckle. A prayer book, you say? Really, Miss Holmes, I'm afraid you've gotten yourself tangled in a bit of nonsense. The poor woman probably wandered off in a fit of confusion. You're overthinking this. Enola leaned in slightly, her voice soft but firm. Mr. Green, I don't think I am. You've been in Bickley Hollow long enough to know that things don't just disappear without a reason. Miss Cranford wasn't confused. She was meeting someone, and I think you were the one she was supposed to meet. His face stiffened. You're mistaken, he said quickly, his voice now cold. I have no idea what you're talking about. You should leave this alone, Miss Holmes. But Enola didn't back down. She pressed her hand onto the counter, her eyes locking onto his with unwavering intensity. You're lying. I don't know why Miss Cranford was meeting you or who else was involved, but I intend to find out. You have until tonight. If I don't get answers from you, I'll take my findings elsewhere. Mr. Green's eyes flicked nervously to the door, but he quickly composed himself. You're making a mistake, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. This is bigger than you think. Leave it alone. Before it's too late. Enola stepped back, her gaze steady. I don't make mistakes, Mr. Green. And this is just the beginning. With that, she turned on her heel and left the shop, the door creaking behind her. She had not expected him to confess, people like him rarely did. But she had planted the seed of doubt, and she was certain it would grow. Mr. Green knew more than he let on, and Enola would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. That evening, Enola made her way to the village square, her mind consumed by the mystery. As the shadows grew longer, she walked with purpose, her eyes scanning the streets, looking for anything that could reveal more about Miss Cranford's disappearance. She needed to act quickly. The note, the prayer book, the cryptic meeting, it was all tied together in ways she was only beginning to understand. Whoever was involved had to be caught before they could slip away again. As Enola approached the town hall, she noticed something unusual, a shadow flickering at the edge of the village green. It was a man, cloaked in dark clothing, moving stealthily toward the churchyard. His figure was familiar, though she couldn't quite place him. Her instincts told her this was no coincidence. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She followed the figure, keeping to the shadows, moving as quietly as possible. She had to know where he was going, what he was planning. This was the key, and she wasn't going to let it slip through her fingers. The man stopped at the gate of the churchyard and glanced around. Enola crouched behind a nearby hedge, holding her breath. This was the moment of truth. Whoever he was connected to Miss Cranford's disappearance. And Enola would be the one to uncover the secret in the prayer book. Chapter 3: The Secrets Beneath the Stones. The moon hung high above Bickley Hollow, casting a pale, silvery glow over the village green. The tall, narrow shapes of the trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, their branches creaking like old bones, but Enola Holmes was not distracted by their mournful sounds. Her eyes were locked on the figure that had stopped at the entrance to the churchyard, a man cloaked in shadows, his movements cautious yet purposeful. Enola crouched lower behind the hedge, her breath steady but her pulse quickening. This was no time for hesitation. Whoever this man was, he was tied to Miss Cranford's disappearance, and he was about to lead her to answers, if she was quick enough. The man hesitated at the gate of the churchyard, his eyes scanning the surroundings, searching for any signs of unwanted attention. When the path was clear, he slipped inside, moving quietly between the rows of gravestones. Enola followed at a distance, her steps as light as a cat's. She had no intention of being discovered, not yet. The churchyard was small but ancient, its crumbling gravestones nestled among the wild overgrowth of ivy and moss. The church itself loomed like a forgotten sentinel, its dark silhouette broken only by the faint light of the moon. Enola knew the church well. It was a place where the villagers gathered for services, but it was also a place of old secrets. Her eyes never left the man ahead of her, though she dared not get too close. He moved with a purpose, straight to the farthest corner of the churchyard, where the stone walls grew thick with ivy. The air felt heavier here, the silence pressing in, as though the land itself was holding its breath. The man reached a particular gravestone, worn and weathered by time, its inscription barely legible. He knelt beside it, his hands moving quickly to clear the ivy from its base. Enola's curiosity reached its peak. What was so important about this gravestone? Why had he chosen this specific spot? She crept closer, just enough to hear the faint scrape of stone against stone. The man was working to open something hidden beneath the surface of the gravestone. Enola's eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary grave. There was a compartment built into the stone, just large enough to hide something, or someone. She had to get closer. But as she took a step forward, her foot brushed against a small twig. It cracked loudly in the still night air, and in an instant, the man's head whipped around, his eyes flashing with suspicion. Enola froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She was caught. But she had no intention of retreating. She stood tall, her voice steady as she stepped out of the shadows. "I'm afraid you're not as alone as you think," Enola said, her words cutting through the night like a knife. The man tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for the pocket of his coat, but he didn't draw a weapon. Instead, he stood still, sizing her up. Enola's gaze never wavered as she faced him. She had to remain in control. She had to show him that she wasn't afraid. "I take it you've been following me, Miss Holmes," the man said, his voice smooth but with an edge of caution. Enola's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. You're not as subtle as you think, Mr. Green. I was beginning to wonder when you'd lead me here. The question is, what are you hiding under this grave? The man's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition passing through them. He stepped back, clearly weighing his options. You've no idea what you're dealing with, he said, his voice suddenly colder. This is bigger than you think. Then explain it to me, Enola challenged. What's under that stone, Mr. Green? What are you hiding from the village? For a moment, the man seemed to hesitate, as though he were considering whether to run or fight. But then, with a slow exhale, he straightened and met her gaze. You're far too clever for your own good, Miss Holmes. Very well, I'll tell you. But understand this, some truths are better left buried. Enola's curiosity flared, and she took a step closer, her eyes scanning his face. I've never been one to shy away from the truth, Mr. Green. Now, tell me what's going on here. He glanced around once more, then, without a word, he knelt down beside the gravestone and began to work it open. The stone shifted with a low groan, revealing a small, dark compartment hidden within. The man reached inside and pulled out a leather-bound book, a prayer book, to be precise. Enola's heart skipped a beat. That's it, she whispered, her gaze locked onto the book. That's what she was meeting for. Mr. Green straightened, holding the book in his hands, his face grim. This prayer book is the key to everything, he said quietly, his voice heavy with meaning. It's not just some religious book. It holds the answers to questions the village isn't ready to hear. Enola's mind raced. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was bigger, much bigger. Why is Miss Cranford involved with this? And what's so dangerous about this book? Mr. Green hesitated again, as though the weight of his words were too much to bear. It's not just about the book. It's about the secret society that's been operating in Bickley Hollow for generations. They've controlled everything, the wealth, the politics, the very lives of the people here. And Miss Cranford, she knew too much. Enola's pulse quickened. A secret society? In a village as quaint as Bickley Hollow? It was too much to fathom. But she knew better than to doubt the evidence in front of her. The prayer book was no mere relic. It was a symbol, a key to something dark and hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful village. And Miss Cranford? Enola pressed. Where is she now? Is she dead? Is that what you're hiding? Mr. Green's expression softened, though there was no comfort in his eyes. I don't know. But I can tell you this much, if she's not dead, she's in terrible danger. And whoever is behind all this won't stop until the truth stays buried. Enola stared at the prayer book in his hands. The weight of it was symbolic. It wasn't just a book, it was the gateway to a past that the people of Bickley Hollow had tried to forget. But it's not just about Miss Cranford, Mr. Green continued, his voice low. It's about the people who control everything in this village. The society uses the book to maintain their hold over the land and its people. And now, Miss Cranford has become a threat to them. She was about to reveal everything, and that's why she vanished. Enola nodded slowly, her mind racing. Then we have to find her. We have to stop them. Mr. Green's face tightened with fear. You don't understand, Miss Holmes. This isn't just about uncovering the truth. The society will do anything to protect their secrets. They won't hesitate to kill anyone who threatens them. You're playing with fire. Enola met his gaze, her eyes burning with determination. I'm not afraid of fire, Mr. Green. I'm going to find Miss Cranford. And I'm going to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Chapter 4: The Secret Society. Enola stood in the quiet churchyard, the leather-bound prayer book in her hands, its weight pressing into her palms. Mr. Green's words still echoed in her mind. A secret society, a group that had ruled Bickley Hollow for generations, hiding their influence beneath layers of secrecy and manipulation. And Miss Cranford, an innocent schoolteacher, had somehow stumbled upon their hidden truth. This was no ordinary case of a missing person. This was something far darker, something that threatened to unravel everything in the village, and perhaps beyond. With the book clutched tightly in her hands, Enola turned to face Mr. Green, who was watching her with a mix of apprehension and resignation. He had given her the information she needed, but she could see the fear in his eyes. Fear of what he had become involved in, and perhaps, fear of what she might uncover next. Why did you help Miss Cranford? Enola asked, her voice steady but probing. What was she going to reveal? Why did she risk her life to uncover this secret? Mr. Green's expression softened, the weight of the past pressing down on him. He looked at the book in Enola's hands, his eyes dark with the knowledge of what it represented. She was the only one who had the courage to ask the right questions, he said quietly. The rest of us, myself included, we turn a blind eye to what's really going on here. But Miss Cranford, she saw through it all. She knew that the power in Bickley Hollow wasn't in the hands of the villagers or the local gentry. It was controlled by something much darker. A secret society, hidden in plain sight. It's the reason this village has stayed so charming, so peaceful. But that peace has a cost. It always does. Enola's brow furrowed. A secret society. Who are they? What do they want? Mr. Green shook his head, looking at the ground. I don't know all of their names, but I know they've been here for centuries. They're connected to the land, the wealth, the local businesses. The wealth of Bickley Hollow didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's been manipulated, controlled. The society has its hands in everything, every major event, every decision that shapes the village. And the prayer book, it's their symbol, their key to holding everything together. Enola's mind was racing. A secret society controlling the very fabric of a community? It sounded like something out of a novel, yet, here it was, right in front of her. What happens if Miss Cranford is found? She asked, her voice hard with the realization that she might be up against more than just a few villagers with too many secrets. What if she decides to reveal everything? What would they do? They'll stop her at any cost, Mr. Green said quietly, his eyes shifting toward the horizon. And if they think she's already told someone? Well, it's better to hope she's just disappeared than be caught trying to reveal the truth. A chill ran down Enola's spine. She had to move quickly. There was no time to waste. The society would not hesitate to silence Miss Cranford, and the village's carefully constructed illusion of peace could crumble at any moment. But there was one thing that was bothering Enola. If the society has been controlling everything here, Why did Miss Cranford have to get involved? Why did she risk so much? Enola pressed, her eyes narrowing as she observed Mr. Green's reaction. Mr. Green hesitated, his expression conflicted. She had her reasons. Miss Cranford, she was different from most. She wasn't content with just teaching. She wanted to know the truth about her family, about the land, about the history of this village. She was determined to uncover the connections that no one else had dared to see. And when she found the connection between the society and her own family, that was when it all changed. Enola felt a wave of understanding wash over her. Miss Cranford wasn't just a victim, she was a seeker, someone who had spent her life trying to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Her disappearance hadn't been a random event, it had been a consequence of her pursuit of answers. "I need to find her," Enola said, the words tumbling out with urgency. "And I need to understand what she found. This prayer book, whatever it holds, will be the key to unraveling everything." Mr. Green nodded, though the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "Be careful, Miss Holmes. You're diving into something much bigger than you realize. The society has eyes everywhere. They'll be watching you too." "I'm not afraid," Enola replied, her voice firm and resolute. "I've faced worse than a few shadows in the dark." She knew she was right. Whatever secrets Bickley Hollow held, she was going to uncover them. She had to. For Miss Cranford. For the truth. The next few days were filled with restless energy and quiet observation. Enola scoured every inch of the village, from the cobbled streets to the small alleyways and the hidden nooks of Bickley Hollow. But each time she thought she had a lead, the answers slipped further from her grasp. It was as if the village itself was pushing back, concealing the truth beneath layers of history, tradition, and silence. Her investigation led her to the village's oldest records, worn, yellowed pages bound together with a fragile twine. The book sat in the dusty corner of the town hall's library, untouched for years. There, Enola discovered something troubling. A series of strange entries, oddly phrased documents, seemed to correspond with the founding of Bickley Hollow, detailing the creation of a guardianship over the land and the people. She didn't need to read too much to understand what it meant. The society had controlled the land long before the village had become what it was. Its members had written the rules of life here, silently shaping the future and manipulating events as they saw fit. One name appeared repeatedly in the records: the Cranford family. Miss Cranford's ancestors were more connected to the society than she had ever realized. Enola felt a rush of clarity, but also a deep sense of foreboding. Miss Cranford's investigation into her family's ties to the society had led her to something far darker than just a hidden power. It had led her to a place where no one dared speak the truth aloud. That evening, Enola returned to the churchyard, the place where the mystery had first unfolded. She needed to think. The prayer book, the meeting at midnight, the cryptic messages, everything was tangled together in a way that threatened to overwhelm her. But one thing was clear: she was getting closer. And with each step, the shadow of danger grew ever nearer. As she knelt beside the gravestone once more, her fingers brushed against the edges of the worn stone, and she whispered to herself, "Miss Cranford is alive. And I will find her." Chapter 5: The Unveiling. The night was cold, and a sharp wind whipped through the narrow streets of Bickley Hollow, causing the trees in the churchyard to sway like ancient guardians. The village, typically so peaceful, now felt like a silent witness to the dark mystery that Enola Holmes was uncovering. The sense of urgency grew stronger with each passing hour, each new clue leading her deeper into a tangled web of deception and long-buried secrets. Enola stood in front of the weathered gravestone once again, her mind racing with the connections she had made. The prayer book, Miss Cranford's disappearance, and the strange society controlling the village, it all pointed to something sinister, a hidden past that refused to stay buried. It was well past midnight, and the village was still. Yet, despite the quiet, Enola felt the tension in the air. She knew she was being watched. The eyes of the village's secret society were not far behind, and she could almost feel their cold gaze lingering on her every step. But she would not be deterred. Miss Cranford's fate was tied to something much bigger than a simple disappearance, and Enola was determined to uncover the truth. With a deep breath, she glanced around one last time to ensure she wasn't being followed. She had learned much from her investigations. Miss Cranford had been on the brink of revealing something monumental. And now, Enola was the only one who could finish what she had started. Turning her focus back to the gravestone, Enola knelt carefully beside it, feeling the rough stone beneath her fingers. The compartment hidden beneath it had been opened once already, but there was something else she hadn't noticed the first time, a faint, almost invisible mark on the stone. It looked like a symbol, half erased by the years, its edges worn down by time. Enola's heart skipped a beat. A symbol. It wasn't just a random decoration. It was part of the society's signature, their seal, something Miss Cranford must have uncovered in her search for answers. Enola's fingers traced the outline of the symbol, and as she did, she felt a subtle shift, a movement beneath her touch. The gravestone began to shift, its weight gradually giving way to her pressure. Enola quickly pulled her hand away, her breath held tight in anticipation. The stone creaked, then slid open, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending into the darkness below. A chill ran down her spine. She had found it, the entrance to whatever secret lay beneath Bickley Hollow. The society had built this hidden passageway, and Miss Cranford had likely discovered it just before her disappearance. With a steady breath, Enola descended the stairs. The air grew colder with each step, the smell of damp earth and ancient stone surrounding her. The faint glow of a lantern she had brought with her illuminated the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist, whispering secrets from the past. The stairs led her deeper into the earth, the silence of the passage overwhelming. At the bottom of the stairs, Enola found herself standing before a heavy wooden door, its surface engraved with the same symbol she had seen on the gravestone. It was unmistakable. This was it, the heart of the society's hidden world. Her pulse quickened as she reached for the handle. The door creaked open with a low groan, revealing a vast chamber beyond. The room was dimly lit by a few flickering candles, and Enola's eyes immediately fell upon the center of the room. A large, round table sat in the middle, covered in documents, maps, and strange artifacts, things that should not have been in a small village like Bickley Hollow. Enola stepped into the room, her gaze scanning the area for any sign of Miss Cranford or her captors. There was no one here, yet she could feel the presence of something, or someone, lurking just beyond her sight. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to uncover the secrets hidden within. Her eyes fell upon a large leather-bound book resting on the table. She approached it cautiously, her fingers hovering above the cover. This was no ordinary book. It was thick, ancient, and covered in a fine layer of dust. She opened it slowly, her eyes immediately drawn to the pages. The book was filled with complex symbols, handwritten notes, and diagrams that seemed to reference things beyond the scope of normal understanding. This was it, the society's true nature. Everything they had done, every manipulation and every decision, was documented here. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes widened in shock. There, in the middle of the book, was a map of Bickley Hollow, and something else. A hidden network of tunnels, each leading to different parts of the village and beyond. The map was marked with several locations, places that were significant to the society's operations. One of the locations stood out above all others, a house on the outskirts of the village, Miss Cranford's family home. The connection was clearer now. Miss Cranford had stumbled upon a secret that tied her family to the society's influence. It was no wonder she had become a target. Enola closed the book with a soft thud, her mind spinning with the revelations. She had to find Miss Cranford, and fast. The society knew that Enola was getting closer to the truth, and they would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. Suddenly, a noise behind her caused her to freeze. A soft footstep, followed by the rustling of fabric. Enola whipped around, her heart racing. "Miss Holmes," a voice called from the shadows. Enola's pulse skipped. The figure that emerged from the darkened corner of the room was none other than Mr. Green. His face was pale, his eyes wide with concern. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You don't know what you're dealing with. You've come too far." Enola's hand instinctively reached for the prayer book in her coat, but her eyes stayed fixed on Mr. Green. "You knew this was here," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "You knew about the secret society, and you knew what they were hiding. What are you involved in, Mr. Green?" He stepped forward, his gaze shifting nervously between Enola and the door. "You don't understand. I never wanted to be a part of this. But once you're in, there's no getting out. The society controls everything. And if they think you know too much, they'll come for you, Miss Holmes. They'll come for you next." Enola took a step back, her mind racing. "What did they do to Miss Cranford?" she demanded. Mr. Green hesitated, his hands trembling. "She was going to expose everything. They couldn't let that happen. They've taken her, she's gone, and they'll never let her return." Enola's eyes narrowed, the fire of determination reigniting within her. "Then I'll find her." Mr. Green stepped forward, his face grim. "You don't understand. They won't let you. It's too dangerous for someone like you. You're just a child playing at detective." Enola's gaze hardened. "I'm not afraid of them, Mr. Green. I'm not afraid of you. And I'll find Miss Cranford, even if it means uncovering everything they've hidden." Mr. Green's expression faltered, and he opened his mouth to speak, but Enola was already moving, her mind set on one thing: finding Miss Cranford, exposing the society's grip on Bickley Hollow, and uncovering the truth that would finally tear their dark secrets apart. Chapter 6: Beneath the Surface. Enola stood still, her breath shallow as she processed Mr. Green's words. The gravity of the situation was settling in like an invisible weight. He wasn't wrong. She was playing a dangerous game, one that could have consequences far greater than she had anticipated. Yet, despite the risks, Enola's determination was unshakable. Miss Cranford was out there somewhere, hidden from view by the very people who had orchestrated her disappearance. And Enola, brave, defiant, and relentless, was determined to find her. She turned away from Mr. Green, her mind already racing with the next steps in her investigation. As she headed back toward the secret passage that led out of the underground chamber, Mr. Green called after her, his voice strained with urgency. "Miss Holmes, please. You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. They'll stop at nothing to protect their secrets. You're walking straight into their trap." Enola paused, turning briefly to face him, her eyes narrowing. "I understand more than you think, Mr. Green," she said, her voice steady. "And I won't stop until I find Miss Cranford." The silence that followed was thick with tension, and for a brief moment, it seemed like Mr. Green might try to stop her. But instead, he stood there, watching her go, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Enola didn't look back. She had learned all she needed from him. The secret society was real, its control over the village far-reaching, and Miss Cranford had uncovered something dangerous. But there was more at play than just a group of powerful men pulling strings behind the scenes. The society's grip was tied to something much older, something woven deep into the history of Bickley Hollow itself. The prayer book, Miss Cranford's research, the symbols, they were all connected. And now, Enola had the key. The night air felt colder as she emerged from the churchyard, the village now empty of its usual bustle. The lamp posts cast long, eerie shadows over the cobbled streets, and the quiet seemed to stretch on forever. Enola's mind remained sharp, though, her thoughts fixed on the next part of her investigation. She needed more answers, answers that would unravel the history of the society, and perhaps lead her to Miss Cranford. Her first stop was the town hall. The records she had found earlier had hinted at the long history of the society and its influence, but she needed more. Enola knew the mayor, an amiable man named Mr. Fairfax, would be at home, and perhaps he might have more information about the village's past, hidden away in dusty old files. The mayor's office had always struck her as a place of quiet authority, yet there was something in its walls, something Enola had yet to uncover. As she approached the town hall, she kept to the shadows, not wanting to draw attention to herself. The village was small, but its people were nosy, and she didn't want to be caught in the act of investigating the very things she'd been warned to stay away from. She slipped in through a back door, which, as always, had been left slightly ajar. The office was dimly lit by a solitary lamp, its yellow light flickering against the wooden floors. The walls were lined with shelves full of dusty books, papers, and the occasional family portrait. A desk sat in the middle of the room, stacked high with files, some of them old, some newer, but all of them potentially significant. Enola approached the desk, her hands moving over the stacks of papers with practiced precision. She was looking for something, anything, that would connect the village's leaders to the society. She had already discovered that the Cranford family was more involved with the society than they realized, but she needed a more direct link. Her fingers brushed over a particular file that seemed out of place. It was an old, leather-bound book, just as weathered and worn as the prayer book she had found earlier. The cover was unmarked, but as she opened it, she realized it was filled with intricate maps and documents, each one more detailed than the last. The maps didn't just cover the village, they extended beyond its borders, stretching into areas that Enola recognized as key locations for the society. Her heart skipped a beat as she flipped through the pages. This was it. This was what Miss Cranford had been investigating. This was the society's network, their hidden influence. And the mayor, Mr. Fairfax, had been keeping these records. But as she continued to turn the pages, her eyes fell on something that made her stomach tighten with unease. There, in the middle of the book, was a list of names she recognized. Some were local villagers, but others were outsiders, powerful men with connections to wealth, to government, to businesses that had shaped the region for decades. One name stood out above the rest. Eleanor Cranford, Enola whispered, her fingers tracing the ink on the page. The name was written with a small note beside it, a detail Enola hadn't expected: daughter of the keyholder. Enola's breath caught in her throat. Miss Cranford's family, her very bloodline, was tied to this society. She wasn't just a teacher who had stumbled upon secrets, she was part of them. The society had known about her, and when she started to question too much, they had to silence her. A cold dread washed over Enola. Miss Cranford hadn't just disappeared. She had been taken. The society had hidden her away because she was a threat, because she knew too much. But where was she now? Was she alive? Enola snapped the book shut, her mind made up. She couldn't stop now. She had to find Miss Cranford, and she had to expose the truth before the society could bury it any further. As she left the town hall, the first hints of dawn were beginning to color the sky. The wind had picked up, biting at her cheeks, but Enola barely noticed. The pieces were all falling into place now. She could feel the weight of the mystery settling around her like a heavy cloak. She was going to need help from someone who knew how to dig deep into secrets. Sherlock. She needed him now, more than ever. But there was no time to waste. The society would be closing in soon, if they hadn't already. With a final glance at the quiet streets of Bickley Hollow, Enola set off toward the train station. She had a plan forming in her mind, a plan that involved following the trail wherever it led. She would find Miss Cranford, and she would expose the hidden world that had been controlling this village for so long. The society wouldn't be able to stop her, not if she could help it. Chapter 7: The Tangled Web. The early morning mist had not yet fully lifted when Enola arrived at the station, her mind still whirling with the information she had uncovered. Bickley Hollow had once seemed like a peaceful little village, a place where nothing happened, where time stood still. But now, with each step she took, Enola could feel the weight of the hidden truths pressing down on her. The society that controlled Bickley Hollow was real, and Miss Cranford had known something that was more dangerous than Enola had imagined. As she stood on the train platform, waiting for the morning train to London, her thoughts turned to Sherlock. She needed him. She needed his insight, his connections, and most importantly, his ability to think in ways she could not. The truth about the society was still elusive, but with his help, she might just be able to piece together the last fragments of the puzzle. The train arrived with a screech of metal on metal, and Enola stepped aboard, taking a seat by the window. The countryside blurred past her as she watched, her mind racing. She had so many questions, and every answer only seemed to lead to more questions. What had Miss Cranford discovered? What was so important about her family's connection to the society? And how far would the society go to silence her? Enola's grip tightened around the leather-bound prayer book in her lap. The book had been left behind, and in many ways, it was the key to understanding everything. She had already seen its importance in the records at the town hall, and now, with the new revelation about Miss Cranford's family, she knew it was more than just a religious artifact. It was a symbol of the society's control. The train rattled on, and Enola's eyes settled on the distant horizon. She wasn't sure what she would find when she arrived in London. Sherlock was always a mystery himself, hard to read, harder still to predict. But one thing was certain: if anyone could help her navigate the labyrinth of secrets she was trapped in, it was him. By the time the train reached London, the fog had started to lift, leaving behind the grey remnants of the morning. Enola stepped off the train and into the bustling station, her footsteps light but determined. She had no time to waste. Sherlock's Baker Street flat was only a short walk away, but Enola had learned long ago not to take anything for granted. She walked briskly through the crowded streets, her coat pulled tight around her to ward off the chill. The streets of London were always full of life, full of noise, full of people who passed by without a second glance at one another. It was a city of secrets, a city where mysteries were born in every shadow. But right now, Enola had one goal: to speak with Sherlock, to tell him everything she had uncovered, and to ask for his help in solving the rest. When she finally reached 221B Baker Street, she wasted no time in knocking on the door. The familiar sound of footsteps echoed from within, followed by the sharp creak of the door opening. Mrs. Hudson stood in the doorway, a warm smile lighting up her face when she saw Enola. "Miss Holmes, how lovely to see you," Mrs. Hudson greeted her. "I suppose it's not just a social visit, is it?" Enola smiled back. "I wish it were, Mrs. Hudson. But I need to speak with Sherlock. It's urgent." Mrs. Hudson's expression softened, and she stepped aside to let Enola in. "He's upstairs, as usual. I'll let him know you've arrived." Enola ascended the stairs with quick, purposeful strides, her mind already on the conversation she was about to have. When she reached the top, she knocked on the door to Sherlock's study. There was no answer at first, but she could hear the faint sound of papers being shuffled, the soft scrape of a chair against the floor. She knocked again, a little louder this time, and the door opened almost immediately. Sherlock Holmes stood in the doorway, his dark eyes scanning her with their usual sharp intensity. He looked much the same as always, dressed in his usual dark coat, a faint air of impatience around him, as if he were deep in thought. "Enola," he said, his voice calm, though there was a hint of curiosity in his gaze. "What brings you here at this hour? You're looking more serious than usual." Enola stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I've uncovered something, Sherlock. Something far darker than I ever imagined." Sherlock raised an eyebrow. "Go on," he said, his tone shifting slightly as he became more interested. Enola explained the situation in as much detail as she could, recounting her discovery of the prayer book, the symbol on the gravestone, and her encounter with Mr. Green. She told him about Miss Cranford's connection to the secret society and the dark power controlling Bickley Hollow. Sherlock listened attentively, not interrupting, his brow furrowed as he absorbed the information. When she finished, Enola took a breath and looked him in the eye. "I need your help, Sherlock. I need to understand how this all connects. And I need to find Miss Cranford before the society does." Sherlock was silent for a long moment. He walked to his desk and began pacing, his fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the table. His mind was clearly working through the puzzle, putting together the pieces with his usual precision. Enola stood still, waiting for him to speak. Finally, Sherlock stopped pacing and turned to her. "You've done well, Enola. You've uncovered more than most people would ever have found. But we're not dealing with just any criminal organization. We're dealing with something far older and more powerful, something that has been operating in the shadows for generations. The society you've described isn't just a group of men looking to control a village. It's a network. And it stretches far beyond Bickley Hollow." Enola's heart skipped a beat. "You mean, the society isn't just local?" Sherlock nodded slowly. "Exactly. A network of powerful men, perhaps even women, controlling events from the shadows. They've manipulated the village, perhaps even larger regions, for years. The prayer book you've found, Miss Cranford's family connection, it's all part of something much bigger." Enola felt a knot tighten in her stomach. And Miss Cranford? What happened to her? Sherlock's expression darkened. If she knew too much, if she was getting too close to the truth, she may have been silenced. But it's also possible she's still alive, hidden somewhere, protected by those who want to keep their secrets buried. Enola exhaled, the weight of the situation settling on her. "Then we have to find her, Sherlock. The society will stop at nothing to keep her quiet. We need to act quickly." Sherlock met her gaze with an intensity that mirrored her own. "We will. But we need more than just intuition. We need evidence. And we need to understand how far their reach extends." Enola nodded, determination in her eyes. "I'm ready. Whatever it takes." Sherlock moved to his desk, pulling open a drawer filled with maps, letters, and notes. He sifted through the documents, pulling out a map of the surrounding areas and spreading it on the table. "We'll start by looking into the network," Sherlock said, his voice steady with purpose. "We'll trace the connections you've uncovered and see where they lead." Enola leaned over the map, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Let's find Miss Cranford. Let's expose this society before they can do any more damage." Sherlock's lips curled into a small, calculating smile. "Indeed, Enola. It's time we shine a light into the shadows." The investigation has taken a darker turn, and Enola's search for Miss Cranford grows even more urgent. With Sherlock's help, Enola will unravel the society's network and bring its secrets to light. But time is running out. Will they be able to find Miss Cranford before it's too late? Stay tuned for the next chapter as Enola and Sherlock race against time to expose the truth. Chapter 8, The Edge of the Abyss. The days following Enola's meeting with Sherlock were filled with quiet urgency. The revelation of the society's influence had shaken them both. Bickley Hollow was no longer just a quaint village. It was the epicenter of a network that reached far beyond its borders, hidden in plain sight, manipulating lives and events for generations. Enola was more determined than ever to find Miss Cranford, but the weight of the truth was beginning to press down on her shoulders like 1,000 pounds of stone. The clock was ticking, and every moment Miss Cranford remained hidden was one step closer to losing her forever. Sherlock and Enola had spent the last few days meticulously combing through the records, trying to make sense of the society's far-reaching influence. They traced connections between the local elite, powerful outsiders, and the wealth that had quietly flourished in Bickley Hollow for centuries. Every path seemed to lead back to the society, a secret cabal that had pulled the strings in ways no one had noticed until now. But the deeper they delved, the more dangerous things became. Enola could feel it. Someone was watching her. She wasn't sure if it was the society, or perhaps someone else entirely, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were closing in. It was late afternoon when Enola and Sherlock arrived at the small, dimly lit office of the local constable. The constable, a man named Mr. Horace Pyle, had been less than helpful in their previous encounters, brushing off Enola's questions with vague answers and forced politeness. But now, Sherlock had decided it was time to confront him directly. The constable was an integral part of the village's infrastructure, and if there was any chance he had information about the society or Miss Cranford's disappearance, Sherlock was determined to find it. As they entered the office, Mr. Pyle looked up from behind his desk, startled at their arrival. His narrow, beady eyes flicked nervously between them, and Enola could see the faint twitch of his lips. "Miss Holmes, Mr. Holmes," he greeted, his voice gruff but laced with unease. "What brings you here today?" Sherlock wasted no time. "We're investigating the disappearance of Miss Eleanor Cranford. I trust you're aware of the circumstances?" Pyle nodded stiffly. Yes. It's a tragic case. A woman with no family left in the village, no one to miss her. She had some odd habits, I suppose, but that doesn't mean, well, I don't know what happened to her. She's probably just gone off on one of her walks. She did that sometimes when she was upset. Enola frowned. And the prayer book she left behind? The cryptic note? Her research into the society's influence over the village? Do you really think she just left? Pyle shifted in his seat, his eyes darting toward the door as if checking for someone's approach. Enola didn't miss the nervous flicker in his expression. There was more to this than he was letting on. "Miss Holmes, you must understand," Pyle said, leaning forward slightly. "Bickley Hollow is a quiet village. We don't have such troubles here. People don't just vanish without reason. If you're insinuating something sinister, I... Sherlock cut him off sharply. "We're not insinuating anything, Mr. Pyle. We're asking you to help us understand what's happening in this village. What do you know about Miss Cranford's family? About her history in Bickley Hollow?" The constable hesitated. The walls of his office felt suddenly oppressive, closing in around them. Enola could sense that he was hiding something more than the simple case of a missing woman. And Sherlock was getting closer to prying it out of him. Pyle took a deep breath and ran his hand through his thinning hair. "Miss Cranford's family," he muttered, almost to himself. They were prominent once. But things changed. People moved on. Her father was part of the original founders of the village, a key figure in the early days. But when he died, the family's influence, it dwindled. It's hardly remembered now. Enola's eyes narrowed. But her family had a connection to the society. You knew that, didn't you? At this, Pyle visibly stiffened. His eyes flicked to Sherlock, then to Enola, as if weighing the decision to speak. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of tense silence, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You're right. Her family did have connections to something older, he admitted, his voice hushed. But I can't. Before Pyle could finish, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. Enola's eyes darted toward the door, and Sherlock's hand instinctively moved toward the inside of his coat, as if reaching for a concealed weapon. Pyle quickly stood and straightened his uniform, attempting to act casual. "Mr. Pyle, Miss Holmes," a voice called from the hallway. "Sorry to interrupt." A tall, thin man appeared at the door, another officer, Enola presumed, but this one was more polished, with a more imposing demeanor. He had the air of someone used to giving orders, not following them. "What is it, Officer Jameson?" Pyle asked, clearly irritated but trying to mask it. "I need to speak with you, Constable. It's about the Cranford case." Enola felt a sense of unease wash over her. She didn't trust this new arrival, not with the air of authority he carried and the way he immediately turned his attention toward her. "I'll be right with you," Pyle muttered, but Enola could tell from his expression that the conversation was not over. He was merely stalling, trying to shield the truth from reaching her ears. "I'll leave you to it," Enola said, her voice calm but with an underlying edge of resolve. She was getting closer, and she could feel it. But something was wrong. She had to get to Miss Cranford before whatever plan they had for her reached its deadly conclusion. As she stepped toward the door, she glanced back at Pyle, her eyes cold. "We'll be back, Constable. And I suggest you remember that." Once outside, Enola felt a sharp pang of frustration. She had been so close to uncovering the rest of the puzzle. But now, with Officer Jameson's sudden arrival, everything had been thrown off course. Sherlock, walking beside her, shared her frustration but remained silent. It wasn't like him to be so reserved. She could tell he was formulating a plan, working through the information in his head. Enola didn't interrupt him. She had learned that, at times, it was best to let Sherlock work through the details in his own way. Finally, he spoke, his voice slow and deliberate. "This changes things. The Society's influence is deeper than we thought. Pyle is hiding something, and now Jameson has stepped in. It's clear they don't want us getting any closer to the truth." Enola nodded, her mind still sharp despite the setback. "But we're closer, Sherlock. I can feel it. I won't let them keep Miss Cranford hidden. Not now." Sherlock paused for a moment, considering her words. Then he turned to face her fully, his eyes gleaming with that familiar fire. "Then we'll find her. But we'll need to be more careful. Every step we take, they'll be watching." "I'm not afraid," Enola said firmly. "Good," Sherlock replied. "Because we're about to step into the heart of the storm." As they walked toward their next destination, the weight of what lay ahead settled heavily on Enola's shoulders. The Society's reach was long, and its grip on Bickley Hollow was suffocating. But she had one advantage, the truth. And no matter how deep they buried it, Enola Holmes would be the one to unearth it. But the more she uncovered, the more she realized the danger she was in. If she wasn't careful, she might become the Society's next victim. Chapter 9: The Web Titans. The evening had settled over London, casting its long shadows on the cobbled streets as Enola and Sherlock made their way back to Baker Street. The air was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the tension that hung between them. Enola's thoughts were scattered, her mind racing with fragments of information. The constable's evasiveness, the mysterious arrival of Officer Jameson, the records at the town hall, all of it pointed to something larger, something more dangerous than she had anticipated. Sherlock walked ahead, his long strides purposeful as he guided them through the foggy streets. He had been unusually silent since they left the constable's office, his brow furrowed in concentration. Enola knew that when Sherlock was deep in thought, nothing could distract him. But she also knew that the silence between them now wasn't just because he was working through the case. There was something about the recent developments that unsettled him, something that made him cautious. "Sherlock," Enola said, breaking the silence. "What do you think Pyle was hiding? And why did Jameson show up when he did?" Sherlock paused mid-step, his fingers tapping against his chin as he considered the question. "Pyle knows more than he's letting on," he said finally. "He's hiding something, and I don't think it's just about Miss Cranford. There's a deeper layer here, one that goes beyond the missing teacher and the secret society." Enola's brow furrowed. "But what?" The records at the town hall were clear about the society's influence. Miss Cranford was connected to it, and she was getting too close to revealing it. Why else would they silence her? Sherlock's eyes flashed with understanding. "It's not just the society, Enola. It's the connections between the people in Bickley Hollow, the constables, the business owners, the so-called leaders. They've been operating under the guise of respectability for years. But Miss Cranford, she was digging too deep into their past. She was uncovering something they've kept buried for generations." Enola's thoughts raced. "You think it's something about the founding of the village? Something the society is trying to keep hidden?" Sherlock nodded. "Exactly. I don't think the society's influence ends with Miss Cranford. She was merely a casualty in their larger plan to keep control over Bickley Hollow. The key holder, whoever that is, must be someone with a direct link to the founding families, someone who understands how to manipulate the history of this village. And that's why Miss Cranford's family is involved. It's all interconnected." Enola felt a chill at the mention of the key holder. The figure in the records who seemed to hold the power, the one who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. But who were they really? And what was the purpose of this ancient network? Her mind flicked back to the prayer book, the key, Sherlock had called it. The book held more than just secrets about Miss Cranford's disappearance. It held the legacy of a long-hidden power, a power that stretched far beyond the village and threatened to ensnare anyone who dared to uncover it. They reached Baker Street, and Sherlock turned to her, his face set with determination. "We need to find the key holder. And we need to do it quickly, before the society can stop us." Enola nodded, her resolve strengthening. "I'll find out everything I can. I know the society's grip on Bickley Hollow is deep, but I won't stop until I uncover their secrets." Sherlock gave her a small, approving smile. "Then let's get started." The next morning, Enola set out for the village once again, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what she was up against. Sherlock had given her a list of places to check, locations mentioned in the town records, old family estates, and areas that had ties to the founding families of Bickley Hollow. She knew that if she was going to uncover the keyholder's identity, she would need to dig into the past of this village, its old legends, its hidden corners, and the people who had kept its darkest secrets. Bickley Hollow was deceptively peaceful. The ivy-clad cottages, the peaceful gardens, the cobbled streets, it all masked the dark undercurrents that flowed beneath. As Enola walked through the village, she felt as if the very earth beneath her feet was holding its breath, waiting for her to uncover the truth. She stopped at Miss Cranford's family home first. The house was perched on a hill, overlooking the village like a silent guardian. It had been abandoned for years, its windows dark and silent, but Enola knew that somewhere inside, there were answers. As she approached the door, she noticed something odd. There was a small piece of paper wedged in the crack of the doorframe. She crouched down, picking it up carefully. The paper was worn and stained, but the writing was still legible. It was a note, written in Miss Cranford's familiar hand. "The key holder is closer than we think. Follow the symbol, it will lead you to the truth. But be careful. The shadows are watching." Enola's pulse quickened. The note confirmed her suspicions. Miss Cranford had known more than she had let on. She had been piecing together the same puzzle that Enola was trying to solve, and she had left Enola a trail to follow. The symbol. Enola's mind raced. The strange symbol she had seen on the gravestone, the one Mr. Green had been so wary of, it had to be the key. It was the society's mark, the symbol that connected them to the land, to the power. If Miss Cranford had been following it, then Enola had to do the same. With renewed determination, Enola slipped into the house, carefully avoiding the creaking floorboards. She moved through the dimly lit rooms, searching for any clue that might lead her to the next step. The house was eerily silent, as if it had been waiting for her to come. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of aged wood lingered in the corners of the room. In the study, Enola found the familiar old bookshelves, many of them filled with dusty volumes of poetry, history, and literature. But one shelf caught her eye. It was filled with older volumes, family records, journals, and ledgers. As she carefully pulled one of the books from the shelf, she noticed something strange. Behind the book was a small compartment in the wall. It was cleverly hidden, and Enola felt a thrill of discovery as she pried it open. Inside, she found a bundle of papers, neatly wrapped in a faded ribbon. As she unwrapped them, she gasped. There, in the center of the papers, was a family crest, a symbol she recognized immediately, the same one she had seen on the gravestone, the same one that had been linked to the society. This was the society's symbol, their mark of power. The papers contained names, dates, and references to an old family lineage, one that traced back centuries. The keyholder's name appeared again and again. It was the name Enola had feared, the Cranford family. Miss Cranford had not just been a victim. She had been a direct descendant of the keyholder, a bloodline tied to the society's origins. Enola's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the enormity of what she had uncovered. Miss Cranford had been the last living link to a power that had been buried for generations. But now, that power was slipping through her fingers, slipping into the hands of those who would stop at nothing to keep it hidden. The society wasn't just watching her. They were preparing to do something far worse than just silence her. They were going to make sure the truth was buried once and for all. And Enola was about to walk straight into their trap. The secrets of Bickley Hollow are beginning to unravel, and Enola is closer than ever to uncovering the identity of the keyholder. But with the society closing in, will she be able to expose the truth before they stop her? Stay tuned for the next chapter as Enola faces the ultimate danger in her pursuit of justice. Chapter 10, The Truth in the Shadows. Enola felt the weight of the papers in her hands, the heavy revelation about Miss Cranford's family history settling in like a stone lodged deep in her chest. The key holder. The Cranford family was at the center of it all, tied to the secret society that had ruled Bickley Hollow for generations. Miss Cranford hadn't just uncovered their secrets by accident. She had been on the verge of revealing something monumental, something so dangerous that it had cost her her freedom. But now, Enola was too deep to turn back. She couldn't let the society continue their reign of secrecy, not when the truth was right in front of her. She had to act quickly. Her eyes flicked to the door as she tucked the papers into her coat, the faint sound of movement outside pulling her from her thoughts. Enola knew she couldn't stay here long. The society would be watching the house, and if they had any inkling that she had discovered Miss Cranford's hidden trail, they would come for her too. She moved swiftly through the house, pausing only to gather the prayer book she had left behind earlier. The book, the keyholder's family crest, the papers, all of it pointed to one thing: the society's grip on Bickley Hollow was much deeper than she had ever realized, and Miss Cranford had been the only one who had been brave enough to unearth it. Enola's task now was clear: find Miss Cranford, expose the society's influence, and ensure that the truth could never be buried again. As she exited the house, she paused to look around. The streets of Bickley Hollow were quiet, the houses nestled in the shadows of the surrounding woods. Enola could feel the eyes upon her again. The weight of the village's secrets seemed to hang in the air, pressing down on her every step. She had to make her way to London. She needed to consult Sherlock, to piece together the final pieces of the puzzle. But there was something else, something Enola hadn't anticipated. The feeling that someone was following her. By the time Enola reached the outskirts of the village, she could no longer ignore the sense of being pursued. The faint crunch of footsteps behind her, too soft to be the sound of an ordinary passerby, spurred her to quicken her pace. She glanced over her shoulder, only to see the shape of a figure darting behind a tree in the distance. Enola's breath quickened, her mind racing. She had to get to Sherlock, and she had to do so without alerting the society. Whoever was following her wasn't ordinary. They knew exactly how to move without being noticed. But Enola wasn't about to be caught off guard. She stopped abruptly and turned toward the path that led deeper into the woods, stepping carefully so as not to make a sound. The person behind her, whoever they were, would think she had continued down the road to the village square. But instead, she slipped between the trees and crouched low, her body pressed against the rough bark of a nearby oak. She waited. The minutes stretched on, the quiet of the woods wrapping around her like a cloak. Then, the sound came again, footsteps, lighter now, closer. Enola's eyes narrowed as a figure emerged from the shadows, moving with purposeful stealth. It was a man, his face obscured by the low light, but his gait was familiar. She had seen him before, though she couldn't place where. He paused, his gaze sweeping the area. Then, with a quick glance over his shoulder, he continued forward. Enola could feel the heat rising in her chest. He was too close now, and she had no choice but to confront him. With a deep breath, she stepped out from behind the tree, her voice sharp as she called out, "You've been following me." The man froze, his eyes snapping toward her. Recognition flickered across his face, but there was no hint of surprise. As if he had been expecting her to confront him. Slowly, he stepped into the clearing, his posture relaxed but his eyes watchful. "Well," he said, his voice low and calm, "I was wondering when you'd notice." Enola took a step back, her hand subtly resting near her coat where the prayer book was tucked safely away. "Who are you?" she demanded. "And why have you been following me?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her for a moment, his eyes piercing through the dim light. Enola could feel his gaze, cold, calculating. But there was something else, something unsettlingly familiar in the way he carried himself. He wasn't a stranger. "I'm afraid I'm not the one you should be worried about," the man said finally. "The society has eyes everywhere. They won't stop looking for Miss Cranford. And they certainly won't stop looking for you." Enola's heart skipped a beat. The society? Had this man been sent to intimidate her? Or was he something else, someone else? She tried to keep her voice steady. "What do you want from me?" He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile tinged with something darker, something dangerous. "I think you already know. You've been getting too close to the truth. But you're not the first to dig into the society's past. And you won't be the last." Enola's mind raced. "You're not one of them, are you?" she asked. "One of the members of the society?" The man chuckled softly. "No. I'm not. But I have my reasons for keeping tabs on you. I don't want to see you get hurt. Not when you're so close." Enola's eyes narrowed. "Why should I trust you?" He raised an eyebrow, then shrugged. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just giving you a warning. You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Holmes. The society doesn't forgive easily. And neither does the man behind it." The words hung in the air, their meaning settling like a weight in Enola's chest. The man behind it. The key holder. Whoever this person was, they had more power than Enola had realized. "You're wasting your time," Enola said, her voice hardening. "I'm not afraid of threats. If the society wants to stop me, they'll have to do it themselves. I'm not running anymore." The man's eyes flashed with something unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like he might say more. But then, he simply turned and began to walk away, his steps slow but deliberate. "You've made your choice, Miss Holmes," he said over his shoulder. "But you're not as alone as you think. And when the time comes, you'll wish you had listened." Enola stood there for a long moment, her mind spinning. She had learned little about the man's true identity, but his words were clear enough. The society was watching her. And they weren't going to stop until they had silenced her. But she wasn't about to back down. She had already uncovered too much. And she was closer than ever to finding Miss Cranford and exposing the truth about the society that had controlled Bickley Hollow for so long. The game was no longer just a matter of finding the missing. It was a fight for survival. And Enola Holmes was prepared to win. The web of the secret society grows tighter, and Enola's investigation into Miss Cranford's disappearance is becoming more dangerous by the day. With the society closing in, Enola must take even greater risks to uncover the truth. Will she be able to outsmart those who would silence her? Stay tuned for the next chapter as the stakes rise in this thrilling mystery. Chapter 11, shadows of the past. Enola stood in the clearing, her breath shallow, watching the figure of the man retreat into the shadows. The evening had grown darker, the chill of the night air seeping through her coat, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver, it was the weight of the threat he had left behind. The society, the key holder, and the cryptic words he'd spoken all swirled in her mind. "You'll wish you had listened." The warning echoed in her ears, lingering like a dark cloud hanging over her. She wasn't alone in this anymore, but she wasn't sure whether that made her feel safer or more vulnerable. The society knew she was getting closer, and from the way he spoke, it was clear that they were prepared to stop her at any cost. But Enola Holmes wasn't about to back down, not now. She took one last look at the path the man had walked down, her eyes scanning the surrounding woods for any further sign of movement. Satisfied that she was alone again, she straightened her back and turned toward the distant town. Sherlock had told her not to trust anyone fully, and she could sense that this man, whoever he was, had his own agenda. But there was something else there, too. A hint of truth in his words. The man behind the society, the key holder, was closer than she thought. With that thought in her mind, Enola began walking back toward the village. There was no time to waste. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The society had grown bold, and the more she uncovered, the more dangerous her path became. She couldn't allow fear to cloud her judgment. The next day, Enola met Sherlock at Baker Street. The dim light from the window cast long shadows on the walls as he sat, poring over his notes. His expression was concentrated, but when Enola stepped inside, he looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the tension in her face. "You found something," Sherlock observed, his voice calm but tinged with the usual sharpness. "What happened?" Enola exhaled, stepping further into the room. "I'm not sure what's going on, Sherlock, but I'm getting closer. The society, the key holder, it's all connected. I spoke to someone last night, someone who knows more about the society than he should. But there's something strange about him. He warned me to stop digging, told me the society wouldn't stop until I was silenced." Sherlock's gaze turned thoughtful. "And did you listen?" "No," Enola replied quickly, a defiant edge in her voice. "I won't stop now. I have to find out who the key holder is. Whoever controls them controls everything in Bickley Hollow." Sherlock paused, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "The key holder," he murmured, as though testing the sound of the word. "The one with the power to influence, to manipulate, to keep the secrets buried for all these years." "You're right, Enola. The deeper we dig, the more dangerous this becomes." Enola's eyes met his, sharp and unwavering. "Then we can't stop. We've come too far. We need to find out who they are, and we need to find Miss Cranford before they do something worse." Sherlock stood up suddenly, his demeanor shifting from thoughtful to action-oriented. "I've been looking into the records. The society's grip is indeed far-reaching. But there's one place I haven't checked, one final thread I haven't pulled. I believe it's time we dig into the history of the keyholder's lineage. If the Cranford family is the last link to the keyholder, then the family home might hold the final clue." Enola's pulse quickened. She had thought of the house before, but hadn't considered it as the key. The house? But it's been abandoned for years. It's barely more than a shell now. What could we possibly find there? Sherlock's lips curved into a rare, almost mischievous smile. You'd be surprised, Enola. Old houses often hold more than just memories. Sometimes, they hide things people don't want found. The two of them arrived at the Cranford family home that afternoon. The house loomed on the outskirts of the village, its once grand facade now weathered and covered in creeping ivy. It looked forlorn, abandoned, as if the weight of its history had crushed it underfoot. But Enola could feel the energy in the air, the sense that something important had once lived within its walls, and perhaps still did. Sherlock led the way, his keen eyes scanning the surroundings as they approached the front door. The house seemed quieter than ever, its silence oppressive. Enola felt a knot in her stomach, knowing that whatever they found here could be the final piece to solving the mystery. Sherlock reached for the door, but it was locked. He didn't seem surprised. He pulled out a thin metal instrument from his coat pocket, and within moments, the door creaked open with a soft groan. They stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of dust and old wood, but the silence felt alive. Enola could sense something beyond the decay, something waiting to be unearthed. They moved through the rooms methodically, checking every crevice and examining every corner. Sherlock's eyes never stopped scanning the room, his mind always working through the next step. Enola moved toward a small study at the back of the house. It was dimly lit by the waning light of the afternoon, but a thin shaft of sunlight cut through the gloom, illuminating a wooden desk against the far wall. A series of papers were scattered across the desk, yellowed with age but still legible. She walked over and began to examine them. Sherlock appeared behind her moments later. "What do you have?" he asked quietly. Enola flipped through the papers carefully. "These are family records," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of excitement and awe. Miss Cranford must have been going through them, her research into her family's history, into the society. She was trying to uncover something. "Look here," she pointed to a line of text in one of the documents. "It mentions the key holder, and here's the name that ties everything together: Eleanor Cranford, heir to the society's legacy." Sherlock's eyes widened. So, Miss Cranford wasn't just an outsider to this world. She was part of it all along. The keyholder's heir. No wonder they had to silence her. She knew too much. Enola's pulse quickened. "And now I know too much," she said, almost to herself. Sherlock's voice softened, but there was a hint of concern in it. "We need to be cautious. The society will have no mercy on anyone who threatens to expose them. If they haven't already, they'll come after you. They'll come after both of us." Enola met his gaze. "Then we need to be ready." Before Sherlock could reply, there was a sudden sound, a creaking floorboard, the unmistakable rustle of fabric against wood. Enola's heart skipped a beat. Someone else was in the house. They weren't alone. Enola's hand instinctively went to the hidden pocket in her coat, where the prayer book lay, the very symbol of the society's dark influence. She turned toward Sherlock, her eyes wide. "They've found us." Sherlock's expression hardened. "Stay close. We need to move fast. The truth is within our grasp, but we can't let them stop us now." Just as Enola turned to leave the room, the door to the study slammed open. A figure stood in the doorway, shrouded in darkness. I'm afraid you've gone too far, Miss Holmes, the voice said, smooth and chilling. And now, you're going to learn what happens to those who dig too deep. Enola's pursuit of the truth has led her to the heart of the Cranford family's legacy and the society's darkest secrets. But now, with danger closing in, will she be able to expose the truth before it's buried forever? The stakes are higher than ever. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this thrilling adventure. Chapter 12, The Final Gamble. Enola's heart raced as the figure in the doorway stepped forward, its silhouette framed by the waning light from the hallway. The figure was tall, their features hidden in the shadows, but Enola could feel their gaze boring into her. Whoever it was, they weren't here to discuss family histories or the society's power. They were here to stop her. Sherlock moved instinctively, his stance protective as he positioned himself between Enola and the figure. His calm voice broke the silence. "I trust you're not here to offer us tea," Sherlock said with a dry smile, but his eyes were cold, calculating. "Who sent you?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they stepped into the room, just enough for the light to fall across their features. Enola's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the person before her. It was Officer Jameson. Her pulse quickened. The man who had appeared at the constable's office just days before, the one who had been so eager to help but whose presence had always felt off, stood in front of them. His sharp eyes and stiff posture were the perfect disguise for someone who had been hiding his true allegiances. Jameson's lips curled into a cold, thin smile. "Miss Holmes, Mr. Holmes," he said smoothly, though there was an unmistakable edge to his voice. "I should have known it would be you. You've made quite a name for yourselves in these matters. But this time, I'm afraid your curiosity has gone too far." Enola's mind raced. This was it. She had been expecting the society's agents to come for her, but she had never anticipated that someone as entrenched in the village as Jameson would be involved. His sudden arrival in the investigation, his repeated presence at key moments, it all made sense now. "You're one of them, aren't you?" Enola said, the words coming out with a clarity that surprised even her. "The society. You've been playing both sides, haven't you?" Jameson's smile widened, though there was little warmth in it. "I'm not playing sides, Miss Holmes. I'm simply doing what's necessary to protect Bickley Hollow. The society has ensured that this village remains safe, prosperous. You have no idea what you're meddling with." Sherlock's voice was low but firm. "Safe? Prosperous? Or is it just that the society's grip on Bickley Hollow has been more than just economic, Jameson? What you call safety is built on lies. Miss Cranford was about to expose everything you've worked to keep hidden. And now you've come to silence her and us." Jameson's gaze hardened. "You think you understand, Sherlock. But you're not seeing the bigger picture. The Cranford family has always been at the heart of this village's power. Miss Cranford will be, part of something much larger than she realized. And you, both of you, are threats to that balance. To the truth that we have protected for generations." Enola felt a chill as his words settled into her mind. There was so much more at play here than she had imagined. The Cranford family was not just the heir to a secret, it was at the very foundation of this society's power. And Miss Cranford, her disappearance, was only a symptom of a much larger and more dangerous scheme. "Jameson, you don't have to do this, Enola said, her voice softening slightly. She needed to reach him, to appeal to the part of him that still saw right and wrong, not just power and control. You're part of the system that's kept people in the dark for too long. Miss Cranford, she wasn't just a victim. She was fighting for the truth. Can't you see that? For the first time, Jameson's expression faltered, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. But it was gone almost as quickly as it had appeared. He squared his shoulders, pulling a small but threatening device from his pocket, a pistol, its cold barrel gleaming in the dim light. You don't understand, Jameson said, his voice now steely. You never did. The society doesn't deal in moral dilemmas, Miss Holmes. It deals in necessity. In protection. It's too late for you to walk away from this. Enola's breath hitched as the situation spiraled. The pistol in Jameson's hand was a sharp reminder that there was no room for negotiation. But she wasn't about to back down, not now, not after everything she had uncovered. Sherlock, we don't have time to reason with him, Enola said, her voice sharp and urgent. He's not here to talk. We need to get out of here, now. Sherlock's gaze never wavered from Jameson, his eyes scanning the situation with calculated precision. He's right about one thing, Sherlock said, his tone deceptively calm. We don't have much time. But that doesn't mean we can't still win. Enola didn't understand at first. But as Sherlock moved subtly, his fingers brushing the back of his coat, the real plan clicked into place. He wasn't disarmed by the situation, he was in control. The air around him seemed to tighten, and for a brief, charged moment, Enola realized what he was about to do. With one quick, fluid motion, Sherlock dove toward Jameson, using his body as a shield between Enola and the gun. It was a blur of action. Jameson's arm jerked back in surprise, and Sherlock used that moment of hesitation to disarm him, twisting the pistol from his hand and sending it skittering across the floor. The movement was so fast, so precise, that it almost looked rehearsed. Jameson stumbled back, his face a mask of shock and rage, but Sherlock's eyes were hard, unflinching. You won't silence us, Jameson, Sherlock said coldly. Not now, not ever. But Jameson was no ordinary foe. He recovered quickly, his hand darting to a hidden pocket at his belt, where he retrieved something else, a small, gleaming knife. He lunged at Sherlock, but Enola was faster. Without thinking, she grabbed the nearest object, an old brass candle holder from the desk, and swung it toward Jameson's head. The impact was solid, and Jameson staggered backward, dazed, his knife falling to the floor with a metallic clink. Sherlock, ever the strategist, took advantage of the situation. He tackled Jameson to the ground, his hands moving with calculated efficiency. It's over, Sherlock said, pinning Jameson to the floor. Enola's heart was racing as she took in the scene. Sherlock's calm, precise action had neutralized Jameson without bloodshed. They had won, this round, at least. But there was no time to waste. They needed to leave. And they needed to leave now. Sherlock, we need to go, Enola urged, her voice frantic. The society knows we're here. We don't have much time. Sherlock stood and gave one final, steely glance at Jameson, who lay still on the floor. You won't be able to stop us, Jameson. The truth is coming, whether you like it or not. Enola turned and ran for the door, her mind already racing with the next steps. She had the answers she needed, but there was no time to savor the victory. The society was still out there, lurking in the shadows, and Miss Cranford's fate was still hanging in the balance. Sherlock followed her, his pace matching hers, the urgency palpable between them. They had only one chance to stop the society from silencing the truth. And they were going to take it. The society's grip on Bickley Hollow grows tighter, and Enola and Sherlock are racing against time to uncover the truth. With danger closing in on every side, will they be able to expose the keyholder and save Miss Cranford? The stakes are higher than ever. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this thrilling tale. Chapter 13, Into the Heart of Darkness. The cold night air cut through Enola's coat as she and Sherlock hurried through the streets of London, their footsteps echoing in the empty streets. Enola's heart was racing, not just from the physical exertion of escaping Jameson's trap, but from the sheer weight of everything they had uncovered. The society's network was vast, its influence unyielding. They had touched the very core of it now, and with that knowledge came an undeniable truth: there was no turning back. Sherlock's pace was swift, his eyes scanning the darkened streets for any signs of pursuit. Despite their quick escape from the Cranford estate, they both knew the society wasn't about to let them walk away unscathed. Their investigation had made too many waves. And now, with Jameson neutralized for the moment, they were closer than ever to uncovering the heart of the conspiracy. Enola, however, could feel the tension in the air. Jameson's words echoed in her mind: "The truth is buried, Miss Holmes. And when the time comes, you'll wish you had listened." It was clear now that they were up against more than just a group of corrupt men. The society had deep roots, more than just an organization. It was a shadow, a presence woven into the very fabric of Bickley Hollow and beyond. To dismantle it, they needed to understand who was pulling the strings. They arrived at Baker Street just as the last light of dusk faded into the blackness of night. Sherlock led Enola through the front door, his mind already working on the next steps. The sound of Mrs. Hudson's footsteps echoed from the hallway as she appeared at the foot of the stairs, her face creased with concern. "Mr. Holmes, Miss Holmes, are you all right?" she asked, her tone edged with worry. "I heard voices. What's going on?" Sherlock's expression softened, though the urgency in his eyes remained. "We've found something, Mrs. Hudson. And things are about to get much more complicated." Enola moved past Sherlock, her mind still focused on the task ahead. She needed to find Miss Cranford. But to do that, they would have to go deeper into the heart of the society's operations. There was one final piece of the puzzle they needed to find: the true identity of the keyholder. "I'm going to need to revisit the records, Mrs. Hudson," Enola said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "The keyholder, whoever they are, is the key to all of this. We need to learn everything we can about the founding families of Bickley Hollow, their connections to the society, and their connection to Miss Cranford's family." Mrs. Hudson nodded and stepped aside, allowing Enola to continue into the study. Sherlock followed closely behind, already removing his coat and beginning to pull out the maps and records they had accumulated over the past few days. It was time to piece everything together. Hours later, the study was littered with open books, maps, and scattered papers. Enola's eyes were bloodshot from the hours of reading, but her determination had not wavered. The deeper they dug, the more connections they uncovered. The Cranford family had been involved with the society longer than anyone had guessed, but the more pressing question was why? What role had Miss Cranford played? And how had she become a threat to the society? Sherlock, who had been absorbed in his own notes, finally broke the silence. "Enola, I believe I've found something." Enola looked up, her heart skipping a beat as she walked over to where Sherlock was standing, a stack of records in his hand. He laid them out on the desk, revealing a series of detailed genealogical charts. The connections were clear now, too clear. Miss Cranford's family had indeed been at the core of the society's founding, but it wasn't just bloodlines and inheritance that tied her to the society. Sherlock's finger traced a line on the chart. The key holder, Miss Cranford's ancestor, was not just a member of the society. He was its founder, the one who established the network of influence that has controlled the village, the land, and the wealth for centuries. And now, Miss Cranford, as the last living heir to that bloodline, was poised to take over that role. She was becoming the key holder. Enola's breath caught in her throat. So it wasn't just a family connection. It was a role that had been passed down. Sherlock nodded. Exactly. Miss Cranford was not just a passive participant. She was becoming the next in line to lead the society. That's why they had to silence her. She had discovered too much, she was close to unraveling their power. And once they realized that, they couldn't let her continue. Enola's mind was reeling. She had thought Miss Cranford's disappearance was the result of curiosity, of someone simply poking around where they shouldn't have. But now, the true scope of her involvement with the society was clearer. Miss Cranford hadn't just uncovered a secret. She had been on the verge of changing everything. Sherlock's eyes met hers. If we're going to save her, we need to act quickly. The keyholder's position is more than just symbolic. It's the cornerstone of the society's power. Without it, they fall apart. But with it, they control everything. We have to find her before they do, Enola said, her voice tight with urgency. If we don't, the society will be unstoppable. Sherlock nodded, a hint of determination flashing in his eyes. I've sent word to some of my contacts in London. They'll help us locate the keyholder's current residence. But we need to move now. The society won't wait. Enola's pulse quickened. This was it, the final push. The pieces were all in place. They had the map, the bloodlines, the connection to Miss Cranford's family. All that was left was to find her, and expose the truth before the society could bury it. The next day, Sherlock and Enola made their way to the last place they thought they might find Miss Cranford, an old estate hidden in the outskirts of the city, connected to the Cranford bloodline. It was the last known residence of the family, and it was said to have been abandoned for years. As they arrived at the estate, the mist seemed to thicken around them, swirling like smoke. The house loomed ahead, dark and imposing. It was eerily silent, the windows dark, the gates creaking in the wind. Enola felt the familiar sense of foreboding that had followed her from the moment she stepped into Bickley Hollow. They were close, but they were also in danger. She could feel the society's eyes watching, waiting for them to make a mistake. Sherlock turned to her, his expression grim. This is it, Enola. The answers we seek are inside. But we need to be careful. The keyholder is no longer just a person. They are a symbol. And whoever controls that symbol controls everything. Enola nodded, the weight of their mission settling heavily on her shoulders. The truth was within their grasp, but so was the society's wrath. They were no longer just chasing a missing person. They were about to confront the heart of the conspiracy that had shaped Bickley Hollow for centuries. "Let's go," Enola said, her voice steady, despite the storm raging in her chest. "We finish this now." And with that, they stepped toward the doors of the Cranford estate, ready to face whatever lay within. The truth is within reach, but the stakes have never been higher. Enola and Sherlock are about to confront the heart of the society's power. Will they uncover the secrets of the keyholder before it's too late? Stay tuned for the next chapter as the thrilling mystery nears its explosive conclusion. Chapter 14, The Keyholder Revealed. The air inside the Cranford estate was thick with the scent of age and dust, as though the house itself had been holding its breath for decades. The grand, looming structure stood silent in the midst of the fog that had rolled in from the nearby river. The once impressive walls, now cracked and weathered by time, hid a history far darker than any story the village had ever whispered. Enola's footsteps echoed on the creaking wooden floors as she followed Sherlock through the grand hallway. The house was a maze of dark rooms, ancient portraits, and faded tapestries, each piece seemingly frozen in time. But there was something in the air that told Enola they were not alone. She could feel the presence of the house, its secrets, its history, pressing down on her. Sherlock's eyes scanned the room, his gaze flicking from one detail to the next. He had already begun to analyze the space, no doubt looking for any clue that might reveal Miss Cranford's whereabouts or lead them to the keyholder. But Enola knew that the truth they sought wasn't going to be easy to find. The society had buried their power deep within the walls of this house, and it was going to take more than just a keen mind to uncover it. "We're getting close," Sherlock murmured, his voice low. "I can feel it. This house is a repository of secrets. The keyholder is tied to it, perhaps even hidden within it." Enola nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied the house around them. "We need to move quickly," she said. "The longer we stay here, the more chance we have of being discovered. The society won't let us get away with this. If we're going to find Miss Cranford and expose them, we need to act now." Sherlock glanced at her, his lips curving into a faint but reassuring smile. "You're right, Enola. But we need to be methodical. The keyholder is here, somewhere. We just have to find the right place." They moved through the house in silence, the only sound the soft rustling of their footsteps on the worn rugs. Every now and then, Sherlock would pause, his keen eyes catching something, a hidden door, a strange mark on a wall, a symbol that might have been overlooked by anyone else. He was searching for something that tied the house to the society's power, something that would lead them to the truth. They reached a door at the end of the hallway, small, unassuming, and covered in dust. It was different from the other rooms in the house. The others were grand, filled with ornate furniture and luxury. This door, however, looked as though it had been forgotten by time itself. But to Enola's eyes, it felt like it held the answers to everything they had been searching for. Sherlock reached for the handle, but before he could turn it, Enola stopped him. "Wait," she said softly. "Something's not right." Sherlock turned to her, his expression curious. "What do you mean?" Enola stepped closer to the door, her hand brushing the edge of it as she examined it more closely. She could feel the faint hum of energy behind it, a presence that seemed to grow stronger with every passing second. This wasn't just any room. It was the heart of the house, the place where the keyholder's power was concentrated. The very foundation of the society was tied to this space. "This is it," Enola said quietly, her voice trembling with the weight of the realization. "This is where everything ends." With a swift motion, Sherlock turned the handle, and the door creaked open. The room inside was unlike anything Enola had expected. It was small and dimly lit, but it radiated an eerie, oppressive atmosphere. The walls were lined with bookshelves, each filled with ancient tomes and journals, many of them written in languages Enola couldn't understand. But what caught her attention immediately was the large desk at the center of the room, cluttered with papers and old artifacts. In the center of the desk was a single, leather-bound book. Enola stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel it, the truth was here. She could sense it in the very air. Sherlock moved to her side, his eyes scanning the room as he took in the sight of the desk. "This is it," he said, his voice steady, but with an unmistakable note of anticipation. "The keyholder's legacy is written here. Everything we need to know about the society, its origins, and its purpose." Enola reached for the book, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. The first page was blank, but as she flipped through it, she found something that made her breath catch in her throat, an inscription written in a familiar hand. "To those who seek the truth, the key is not a person, but a place. The heart of Bickley Hollow lies within the walls of the house. Only by unlocking its secrets can the power be returned to its rightful heir." Enola's mind raced as she read the words. The key wasn't a person, it was a place. The heart of Bickley Hollow was here, within the walls of this house. The power of the keyholder didn't lie in a family bloodline. It lay in the land itself. Suddenly, a soft creaking sound filled the room, like the whisper of a door opening. Enola spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for the prayer book at her side. She had felt it before, but now, there was no mistaking it. Someone, or something, was behind them. From the shadows, a figure stepped into the room, their silhouette tall and imposing. Enola's heart skipped a beat. The person was draped in a long, dark cloak, their face hidden beneath a hood. "I see you've found the book," the figure said, their voice cold and unsettling. "But you're too late, Miss Holmes. The society has already made its move." Sherlock took a step forward, his body tense as he surveyed the figure. "Who are you?" The figure's laugh was low and mocking. "You're not as clever as you think, Mr. Holmes. You've uncovered the truth, but now you'll have to face the consequences." Enola stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear building inside her. "I won't let you control this place any longer. The society's reign ends now." The figure hesitated for a moment, then slowly removed their hood, revealing their face. Enola's breath caught in her throat. The person before her was not a stranger. It was someone she had seen before, someone she never would have expected. It was Jameson. The figure behind the society's power is finally revealed. Enola and Sherlock are face to face with the key holder, but will they be able to stop the society before it's too late? The final showdown is at hand, and the truth is more dangerous than they could have imagined. Stay tuned for the explosive conclusion. Chapter 15, The Final Confrontation. The realization hit Enola like a jolt of cold electricity. Standing before her, unmasked and unrepentant, was Jameson, the man who had been lurking in the shadows, the agent of the society who had watched her every move, the one who had led her to this very moment. She had expected many things in this investigation, but this revelation was a blow she hadn't seen coming. "You?" Enola's voice was barely a whisper, but the shock in it was unmistakable. "You've been working for them all along?" Jameson's lips curled into a cold, detached smile, his eyes glinting with the smugness of someone who believed they had already won. "I'm afraid you've underestimated me, Miss Holmes," he said, his voice calm but laced with malice. "I've been watching you, waiting for the right moment. And now, here you are. You've uncovered more than you should have, and now, you will pay the price." Sherlock stepped forward, his body tense with the same realization. "You've been behind it all," Sherlock said, his voice sharp. "The society, the disappearances, the manipulation, everything. You were the puppet master." Jameson laughed, the sound cold and void of warmth. "Not just the puppet master. I am the key holder. The true ruler of this society, the one who has controlled Bickley Hollow for generations. The power is mine, and you, Mr. Holmes, and Miss Holmes, are nothing more than obstacles standing in the way." Enola's mind raced as she processed the weight of Jameson's words. The key holder wasn't some shadowy figure behind the scenes. It had been him all along. The man who had been posing as a helpful officer, a mere cog in the machinery. The puppet master, the final link in the chain of control that had been passed down through generations. But Jameson had made one critical mistake: he had underestimated her. "We've come too far to turn back now, Jameson," Enola said, her voice steady, despite the storm of emotions churning within her. "You may have controlled this village for years, but your time is up." Jameson's smile faltered for the briefest of moments, and Enola seized the opportunity. She stepped forward, her hand gripping the prayer book tightly, the same book that had been the key to this entire conspiracy. "The truth has already been exposed. You can't silence it." Sherlock, ever the strategist, moved with fluid precision, positioning himself between Enola and Jameson. "It's over. You've lost." Jameson's eyes hardened, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something, anger, fear, perhaps. The power that had once been in his hands was slipping away, and he knew it. "You're mistaken," Jameson hissed, his voice darkening. "The society's roots run deeper than you can imagine. Even if you expose me, even if you take me down, there will be others to replace me. The system won't stop just because you uncover the truth. It's built into the very fabric of this village. It will always rise again." But Enola, standing tall and resolute, wasn't deterred. She could feel the weight of everything she had uncovered, the lives of those who had suffered, the stories that had been buried, the truth that had been kept in the shadows for so long. This wasn't just about the society. It was about everything they had tried to bury. "You're wrong," Enola said firmly. "The truth is more powerful than you think. And I'm not done yet." Before Jameson could react, Enola moved with swift precision, stepping to the side to give Sherlock the opening he needed. In a flash, Sherlock reached for the map, pulling it from the desk where they had placed it earlier. With practiced hands, he ripped a section of the map that had been tucked away behind a false panel, a secret compartment that Jameson had obviously overlooked. Jameson's eyes widened in disbelief. "No, that can't be." Sherlock held the piece of paper up for Enola to see. It was a document that confirmed everything. A record of the society's origins, the names of its founding members, and the keyholder's lineage. And at the bottom, the names of those who had perpetuated the society's control, names that were linked not just to Bickley Hollow, but to the very structure of the power that governed far beyond the village's borders. Enola took a deep breath. We have what we need. The truth is here, in writing. The world will know what you've done. Jameson's face turned pale. You think you can expose me, stop me, but you can't. They'll never believe you. They'll never care. The truth is too dangerous for them to face. They'll bury it, just like you tried to bury me. Sherlock's eyes glinted with finality. Perhaps. But you're forgetting something. We've already shown the cracks in your facade. And once people start questioning, the truth will spread. You won't be able to stop it. Jameson's anger flared, and in that moment, Enola knew they were at a crossroads. The truth, once exposed, would spread like wildfire. The society's influence would never be the same. But they had to be careful. The more they uncovered, the more dangerous it became. The society wasn't going to let them leave easily. Now, Sherlock said, turning to Enola, we make sure that Jameson's influence doesn't continue. The documents we've uncovered will be enough to take down the remaining structure of the society. We've got the evidence we need. Enola nodded, her heart still pounding. The truth was out. The society's hold over Bickley Hollow, and possibly beyond, was beginning to crumble. But she knew they weren't done yet. We need to act fast, Enola said. Before Jameson can send for reinforcements. Without another word, Sherlock moved to secure the papers, gathering them up with quick efficiency. Enola, her mind racing, glanced toward Jameson, who was now seated at the desk, defeated but seething. He wasn't giving up, not without a fight. But Enola knew he had already lost. They needed to get out of there, and fast. Let's go, Enola said, her voice full of finality. We've done it. The truth is free, and nothing will stop it now. The final confrontation has been won. But the fight for the truth is far from over. With the society's hold beginning to crumble, Enola and Sherlock must now take their victory to the world. The keyholder has been revealed, but the battle for justice is just beginning. Will Enola's courage and determination be enough to ensure the society's fall? Stay tuned for the explosive conclusion. What did you think of the thrilling conclusion? The mystery is solved, but new challenges await Enola and Sherlock as they expose the truth to the world. Want more adventures with Enola Holmes? Drop a comment below to share your thoughts, or let us know what new mysteries you'd like to see her unravel next.